Good evening, good evening. Welcome to Sacred Enzyme. I'm Stacy. I hope you're doing well today. So, I'm going to wait a couple minutes and see if anybody wants to join the chat. We haven't been on in a while. So, we'll just hang out here for a minute and see how everybody's doing. And we'll wait to see if anybody wants to jump in and then we'll get started. I have a lot of notes to go over. I've been busy doing other things, but I've been reviewing a lot of material and I've been taking notes on it. So I'm getting like a lot of notes accumulated. So I need to like go through some of this stuff. Otherwise, I'll have to make like 10 different videos for all this stuff. So I was looking at some information by Professor Gunnar Heinsohn, Heinsohn. And he has a Toronto conference that he did in 2016. And what Professor Gunnar is hypothesizing is studying the strata of all around the world of the ancient sites and different places and comparing it to what's recorded throughout history. And the particular area that he focused on was, quote unquote, the Dark Ages. So he was looking at like right before AD into, I think it was like the 1600s or something like that, 1700s. And then he was also focusing on the ancient history of like these early tribes and different things. So I'm going to read the notes that I took because he had a lot of interesting information. But this has to do with the Christ millennial and how people feel like we've already been in the Christ millennial and that the saints were here. And I do believe that's true because these archetypes present themselves in the field all the time. And so whatever is pushed into the field and what's embodied is what manifests in the field. So the potentiality for anything is always there. This is what the predictive programming is all about with TV, media, all of these things. This is why it's so important that they try to keep control of all of the media content. Okay, so these are the notes that I took. So Professor says that he wanted to focus more on the first millennial AD and the Roman Empire. So texts say this was caused by demographical, which is obviously people and classes of people, or by economic factors, which is cataclysms. Okay, so other systems having cycle changes come to Earth, and does it, is this what happens and the frequency of the planet gets upset? It's just something to think about. Or were these orchestrated? This is the other thing that I want us to think about. Could these have been orchestrated, right? Like programmed events on the clock. On this clock back here. These are all programmed events on these clocks, on the clock of our time cycle. Okay. So what he discovered after all of these studies that he'd come across was that our time has been basically, hi, how you doing? Okay. He basically proves through studying the strata that these groups that they say were here and here and here and here, a lot of that is non-existent. And that we have, like he said, anywhere between 700 and he said could even be more, up to 2,000 years added to our timeline. So I was like, oh boy. So one of the things that he made a good point of, and this is one of the things that I wanted to bring up, was that I did a video the other day and I was talking about the saints and the Florida place name book. Well, there were 3 different patches of saints that came through. There was like some at the beginning around Christ's time. You had the ones for the authors that contributed to the Bible canons, right? And then you have these groups that came through the middle. There was like 3 different times, 3 different stages. You got Martin Luther and those saints. Okay, well, if that was all the Christ millennial, then there was no time in between that because the time was altered, right? And it was like a 250 year window. and that the rest of the time had been added, so people wouldn't remember that it was that we'd been in the Christ millennial and that it comes back. I think that the number is it's every so many 100 years, and it might be 250 that we have an event that brings a new archetype into it because the time is on the wheel. So what he was talking about is the cathedrals all over the world, these massive cathedrals. Like, why would they build some in the first century and then 400 years later they built them the exact same way that they did originally, up to the complete chemical composition, is what he was saying. They did chemical composition tests on these structures, and that they all match down to like the most minute detail. The chemical composition is the same. So the question is did they not have anything they could have upgraded? They didn't learn anything in 400 years time from the time when they started building castles, right? I mean, yeah, it totally makes sense. That's, some kind of improvements would have had to have been done. You had to have learned something new in 400 or 500 years. You mean to tell me you'd use the identical, exact same blueprint and the same chemical composition down to the level of microscopic level? And then to add to it, he was saying, and then in the late ages, same thing. They were building all those castles, around the 14 and 1500s or so, they say, according to the mainstream narrative. They were the exact same as the other two groups of castles. So, and then he was talking about the disasters that were documented throughout time. And see, this is kind of like steering us in a direction here. And I've kind of been mulling over this lately, but what he was talking about, that there were supposedly 3 disasters that happened, and that these 3 disasters are what put us into the Dark Ages. But he says, what if they weren't 3 different disasters? What if it was just one disaster, right? And what I think this disaster was when the North Pole got hit. The North Pole got hit. Hey. Sorry, guys. The dogs always want to do this when I get on live. So, hey, come on now. There was like meteors that hit. Or so we thought it was meteors. But I've started to find out little bits and pieces here and there. And there's a documentary that I'm going to talk about that I've been watching. It's almost 6 hours long, and it's about Atlantis. Ghost, please. Come on. Just a second. Come on. Out of here right now. Stop. Go on. Go on. No. Come on. Quit. Annalise. Yes. Can you please get her out of here? I'm on a live. I'm on a live, hon. Come on, call her. She's barking at the neighbors. They're out in their golf cart. Sorry. Everybody rides like little vehicles out here, like golf carts and like little ATVs. And my dogs are like stalkers. They hang out. I can't go anywhere without them. So if I'm in here, they follow me in my office, and then they sit and peek out the window and bark at everybody. Okay, so what he was talking about were these disasters that, it was just one disaster, and not like we had all of these different events that happened at different times. And so he was talking about, let me see if there's any notes here that really stand out. Okay, the 3rd century crisis strangles the West Empire, stretching 2,500 kilometers. Okay, Justinian's 6th century comet devastates the Eastern Empire, stretching 2,500 kilometers from Sirmium to Karnak. The 930s disaster flattened the slim periphery missed by the first 2 strikes in a huge arch from Oslo to Baghdad, 400 kilometers. Attack seems surgically executed with little overlap. A celestial super monster may have tried to finish Rome with just one blow in the 3rd century. Okay, so what he's saying here is he's saying that it sounds so ridiculous that Rome was completely divided up, and that one part of Rome supposedly got hit by these different types of disasters, right? And then 300 years later, the other side. But then it missed the whole peninsula. So then there was a third one that came because this disaster just didn't take care of the first two parts all in one time. So it had to come back for a third. So he's saying that, this whole hypothesis that we would have Rome, Italy just destroyed in 3 different precise surgical strikes every 300 years. He's like, that's just crazy, which, it does sound crazy. It's almost like they never expected us to get this far, right? That we would never double check. Like we would never go back and check. It's almost like that, like if you've ever been in management and you got a bunch of teenagers that work for you, that they'll try to get away with anything because they don't think you ever check behind them. But if you check behind them, you get what you expect, right? But you have to inspect what you expect. So I just think that they never thought that any of us would ever inspect any of this or that we would ever be able to get our hands on this knowledge. I mean, that's really the only thing I can think at this point because it's laughable. It's laughable at this point. So, the 3rd, the 6th, and the 10th century, these are padded time periods in between. And then, the archaeology proves it. The archaeology is proving it because they're digging in the ground and they're saying, okay, well, if this was supposed to have happened at this time, why wouldn't this have been above it, right? Why is it below it? That means because it was pre-existing. It was pre-existing to that event. So obviously that doesn't lie. That doesn't lie. So, he's saying that what if there's only one event that created a window to fudge our timeline 700 years, then our saints are from the same time period as well. So all the saints, they weren't spread out. So then we have to look at Christopher Columbus coming to America and all this stuff. All this stuff is nothing but fabrications. I mean, we already know that Christopher Columbus story is fake. I mean, we already know that that's made up. But now that it's pretty much been ascertained and proven that our timeline has been padded. So if our timeline has been padded, we got to go back and look at everything. In 1776, did they know that our timeline had been padded? I mean, really, did they know? Or did they think that they were just starting a new, like some kind of new calendar system? I mean, obviously, we used to be on a metric system in Atlantis because the United States or America is still on the same system, right? It's only all around the world that they changed to metric. Maybe it's because the United States didn't have the money, to change the system. Then we're different from everybody else, right? So, we had a universal system that was here that didn't ever get changed. And it was on a 12-inch measurement, right? Because the people that were here were big. They were large humans. They were left over. So, I'm also going to mention that he talks about like the basileus. And so I had hypothesized a while back when it's been a few weeks back that, these saints, that was like their central hub. Maybe the star forts was where we had these saints, that they were living in the star forts and that these were big learning centers. I mean, it's something to think about. And then of course, communal living, that had to have been happening all over because, people were learning trades back then. And, in our original organic timeline, people didn't have jobs in the traditional sense of what we think of today. Everybody was raised up, and your talent, your God-given talent, was what you contributed to the community. And it was a communal type community. People traded and bartered, everybody had their own thing. Everyone contributed. It's not like it is now. So, I think that that's really something that should be explored more, is that, this whole timeline thing. And then, so then the next thing Let's see, what else did I wrote so many notes on that. And then there's another author. His name is Emmett Sweeney. He builds on this whole material as well, and I've still got to study his stuff. But you know, the Atlantis documentary, oh my goodness, that was so good. And it's almost just like I remember it. I mean, almost to the T. So, the Legend of Atlantis, and I'm just going to read all my notes because there's so much stuff, so much stuff. Okay, the expansion of the cosmos from the source was called the Omega. It was called the Omega cycle. Since everything diverged from the source, the Father, the suns, and the Milky Way moved from source. Okay, I'm sorry. I got to turn the light on. The further the suns moved away in the Milky Way from source, the weaker the connection to source from which all comes. So it means that all life was in spiritual decline or descent to lower dimensions, slip into the third dimension of this. Okay, all right, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to read over my notes because I wrote all this in sloppy. So basically, in the Legend of Atlantis, it says, just like what we've talked about on the channel, that people decided to do this experiment, and so they lowered into these dimensions. And so they had to fractalize themselves as they came down because the body couldn't hold the full expression of the soul at the time. And so the other thing that I want to add that I was learning about and a little further on that I didn't take notes on was that there were two groups of humans, right? And I've talked about this, us coming from animals, right? Okay, well, Earth, Mother Earth, and all of the animals here, these were the original forms. And so they took these forms, and these forms started being hybridized and hybridized and hybridized. And it was in order to hold the soul to be able to have the experience, okay? So there were modifications that were constantly being made over time because they were building the case, the computer case, the organic biological meat suit to house the soul. Okay. All right. So this experiment was going on, but the higher evolved beings that were overseeing the experiment were not supposed to be involved. Okay. But when we have planetary resets here and the frequency on the planet changes and we have a reunification of particle and antiparticle, then there can be communication made, right? There can be a convergence that can happen. And so we had these fourth density beings that were able to intermingle with their density creation, right? And so, they develop relationships with them. So I would say that this was kind of like maybe after there was this big cataclysm, right? They set up inner Earth before outer Earth was set up, right? So they're in the center, in this hub in the middle, in the emerald heart of Earth, doing this experiment all on the outside while they monitor from the inside from a higher dimensional space. Basically, they're higher vibrational beings, so they can't really exist right now in this timeline here because it's so low frequency, right? All right, so he was saying that they intentionally did this. It's just like Theo told me, is that we wanted to come into this experience. So we were one androgynous light being, and then we went into two, and we came down here into this experience in this three-dimensional space. Sometimes we've had lifetimes where we were here together. There were lifetimes where I would be on the other side and he would be in 3D and vice versa, holding the mirror, guiding, however you want to call it, being an oversoul. So Atlantis race was in the fourth dimension and orchestrated its descent into the third dimension. It was planned. Okay? So I suspect that the souls that incarnated in the same planetary nodes are for this current timeline. Okay, because they were talking about Atlantis. Actually, there's another link that I'm going to put underneath this live when we wrap it up. There's another old world Florida. He has a thing about Atlantis on his channel, talking about that. Atlantis, one of the headquarters was here in Florida, and it was Tampa. And I said, and the crown jewel is Lake Wales, right? If you go and look at the city seal for Lake Wales, it clearly says on there that Florida's Lake Wales is the crown jewel of Florida. They're not joking. Because it is. This is where the meteor sits. And the tower sits on top of it like a crown. It's amplifying this meteor. And I think the meteor came from Mars. I think say hi, Benji. I know, he's right underneath me snoring. He's got to have surgery soon. He's got to have part of his foot amputated, and I am not looking forward to it. My husband keeps saying, "Are you ready to get this done?" I'm like, no, because it was awful healing the paw the first time when he had to have the tumor removed. So he's just having too much fun hunting lizards, which is another thing, is that we have all these archetypes in the timeline, right? I'm going to turn the light on. I'll be right back because I can't see my notes. I'm half blind already. Let's see. Oh, come on, steady. There we go. Now I can see much better. Okay. All right. So I think that it's possible that we were all born where we were, because Atlantis was the whole United States, and it was South America, North America, and South America were entire civilization, that Poseidon had 5 sons, and that they were all princes, and that they all had an area of the United States during the Atlantean times. It was a whole worldwide civilization, just like we've been talking about. So it says, in the beginning, the civilization was set inside inner earth. Agartha, the Garden of Eden, was created, and many collaborators of the Galactic Federation came to Earth voluntarily. All colors and races of humanoids contributed their galactic or their genetic material, including plant, animal species, to this biological genesis. In the creation plan of the Cosmic Father, Earth was considered a suitable living space, planetarium, which would produce a universal humanoid, which, remember, 8 is the number of Earth, because it's an alloy. This is why we get all of everybody here in the system. And the system is so important to the whole graduation of the cosmos. And, I'm wondering when we get to the end of this system, if we get to the end of the cycle, if something's going to happen with our sun, because, suns, they're living, and eventually they turn into stars, and then they turn into whole universes. So this is like what the whole evolutionary plan is to become a universe. It's to become your own universe, right? It's wild. All right. So it was a universal humanoid would be produced here, able to overcome all polarities and the diversity of climactic zones. Until that time, there had been a great diversity of non-humanoid species. See, this is where my wolf bloodline comes from. Taking part in the development of souls. So up until that time, these animal shapes were only able to embody souls that carried that archetype, okay? This is why they had all these different hybridized animals, was because they were archetypes. They were embodying soul expression that pixelates in this 3rd dimensional space. And what a pixelate looks like what we call a wolf or a snake or a whatever, because it has characteristics and attributes which make it what it is. It's archetype. Okay, so up until that time, there was a great diversity of non-humanoid species that were taking part in development of Earth, right? And it was all a part of the planet Earth, the soul of Earth, which is Earth is a living, breathing, conscious being. She's a being. She's a being. She's conscious. And she's an archetype. And her archetype is the she-wolf. And that Sphinx is her. That's her. That's a statue of her. Okay, so it says, the differences were so great, the souls had extreme difficulty reincarnating into the bodies of other star systems. Okay, because of their archetypes, right? So, like we have the Lyrans and things like this, they have the archetype of the lion. And so you have the canines, the dogons, and the different things. It's the canines. You have the archetype of the dog, or a hound, or a snake, or a dragon, or, whatever archetype, bird. These Celtic bloodlines, I believe they originally come from the sun. I think they come from the sun, and that's the bird. This is Ray. Not Ra, it's Ray. His name is not Ra. It's Ray. I think that's like the biggest thing that they do to make people not realize that is, those people came through the sun. That's where the original template for this thing all came out of, was the sun. Everything was birthed out of our sun. Okay, so the cosmic purpose was to establish a new zone, experiment of creating, synthesizing all souls into a universal body type. So it's a one-size-fits-all system, just like what we've talked about. Dutch, come on. So this new prototype was introduced by the Melchizedek. They came to Earth, and a planetary pregnancy occurred. They made this prototype in their own image and assisted in its genetic improvement. Hello? Okay, so I'm going to read the comments. So what are you cooking tonight? So it says, check out the book Caesar's Column, 1984, 50 years early on steroids. Atlantis, haven't read yet. And Ragnarok, Fire and Gravel, Comet Mud Flood by, I have some of those books already. My dad's got I kept looking for my Atlantis books, and I knew that I'd loaned them out because a lot of people borrow my books. Stop, guys. A lot of people borrow my books, and I need to start writing down who borrows what books, because I'll have like 15 books loaned out, and then I need it, and then I can't find it. But my dad has my Atlantis books. I got to get them back tomorrow. But yes, I have the Ignatius Donnelly one, and then I have the Irish and the Wisdom in the Bible and Pyramids by Connor McDarry. Now that's a good read right there. It basically tells you that the Bible is a book of allegories that was stolen by the Celtic people and turned into manipulation of the masses through religion. So it's a pretty interesting book. And it's all coded, right? It's all coded about archetypes. Cooking rice, beans, tortillas. Yeah, that's what I had tonight. My husband went out of town, and I was just trying to figure out something to eat, so I didn't have to go to the store. All right, so on to the next paragraph. So the plan went well until the downfall of the angels, reincarnating animal-like humans. Okay, so listen to this part. This is interesting. Okay, reincarnated animal-like humans were improved through direct genetic intervention. They changed them into perfect bodies in a short amount of time. Souls from, and this is the first time I've heard of this place, so you guys chime in if you've heard of this place, but it says that souls from Malona, and I believe it's Malona. Okay, now we have to be talking about archetypes here. Malona, Lucifer, Venus, and Mars, right? It says Malona, Lucifer, Venus, and Mars, souls from this place, who from past times already had progressed through the cycles of incarnation, and through creation, we're now able to reincarnate on Earth in order to graduate the system. And I'm guessing when they talk about graduate the system, that they mean eventually becoming your own universe, guys. You get your own system, like Archangel Michael. His system is Nebadon, and he's over like 600 and something universes. There's an endless amount, right? So, all right. So they were incarnating because these bodies got, this is why they wanted them to be gussied up so well. So maybe it was the plan all along, right? They came here and they willingly donated their genetic material to these animal, and maybe this is why these people that are into these cults, that they have sex with animals, right? Maybe this has something to do with it. This story right here of these original humans, Earth humans, like, when I met the World Mother and I went to the North Pole, she told me, I'm the mother of Earth and you come from me. So that means that I'm an Earthling. That means that I came from Earth. I came from one of these animals, because she was telling me that I come from the wolf, I come from her, and she's a wolf too. This is our archetype that we came into the system in. When the Earth was created, that was her archetype. So they were able to come in by finally upgrading and tweaking these bodies. This is why they wanted them to look in their own image, so they could come down and have fun, right? Because when you're etheric, you don't have a physical form. You don't have the pleasure principle. This is what this place is all about. This is a sex planet, guys. It's a sex planet. This is where you can come and experience physicality. Okay, so they, in order to graduate the system, so this is what they did. They came here with the good intentions, right, of graduating the system. And at that time, everybody knew what they were here for. You knew that you were either descending down to descend back up, that what you were doing, you knew what your mission was when you came to Earth. But something happened, and that communication got severed. Okay, so it says here, from this point on, there were two types of humans inhabiting the Earth. We have the one true immortals and physically etheric beings. These are the inner Earth beings, right? They're the watchers over creation. And then we have the mortal creation, right? The ones that came from Earth. Like, Mother Earth says that I came from her. So this is a mortal creation that started out here on Earth when she first started Earth. When she first embodied Earth, and Earth became a system. The mortal creation who reincarnated to purify themselves and develop towards human beings. So we, some of us started out on Earth, and we started in the smallest of smallest thing. And we've been here all this time, growing Earth. And we've been reincarnating as time has went on, as these bodies have changed and been able to hold more and more of our soul expression, that we've come in. Angelics are here. There are all different kinds of beings here inhabiting these vessels. And the reason why is because we're in a very special time. Everything is ending on our cycle. So they had indiscretions with their creations, right? And this was against the rules. So archetypes cannot be introduced to the physical form until they're ready to hold it. Okay. This is like giving celestial knowledge to a form that can't handle it. You're going to short it out. Okay. This was not supposed to happen. This was skipping. This is cheat codes, guys. This is what happened. They got slipped the cheat codes through the old hanky-panky. And so then we had hybridized humans. So this really put a wrench in the program, because we had these celestial beings that were trying to keep all this stuff separate, right? This is something that they were doing to develop the universe, to develop souls in a one-size-fits-all system where everybody could learn to be together in this system. All the throwbacks came here. If your system ended on your planet, you weren't cutting the mustard, that planet got reset. Where do you guys think you came? You came down to 3D. came down to 3D. So this is what we got: the Lucifer archetype, and maybe Lucifer's, I think's got a bad rap, right? Because we're in an inversion timeline. So Lucifer is okay when you're in balance, right? Aerofam and Lucifer, we have two different sides of the spectrum, but we're not supposed to be either one of these. We're supposed to be in the middle. We're supposed to embody the middle of the road. We can't get in these different time cycles where these archetypes are jockeying for the center stage, right? One never totally disappears. One will take the forefront, and then that will be what's embodied. And so whatever is embodied by the masses is what takes the field. So literally, the predictive programming has made us materialize the reality that these people want to live, that they want to live. And the joke's on us. That's the bad thing about it, is all this time the joke's been on us. Okay, so what ended up happening is, after they did the old hanky-panky with the Earth humans, because they weren't supposed to introduce these archetypes until these vessels were ready, spiritually ready. This resulted in immortals losing their impartiality, because at that point in time, they were no longer unbiased in this experiment, right? They're invested. You had these humans that were here on Earth, right? That were Earthlings, and they knew that they were having interactions with these higher dimensional beings, the Watchers, because at that time, the vibration of the planet was higher. So there was interaction directly. And so, they were trying to give them their daughters, they're trying to get favors. These, they wanted these, they're animalistic. We came from animals, so we have our animal ways. That's the whole point of this experiment here, is how to balance your animal part from your spiritual part. So they lost their impartiality, and then they lost their immortality. And then they had to leave Agartha, right? Because when they did that, they lowered their frequency, right? That frequency scale, you can't do that kind of stuff. You can't do that kind of stuff when you're vibrating at a higher level. When you do that, you just lowered yourself down. So what these guys did is they got banished from Agartha, the Garden of Eden. They got kicked out. This is what this is all about. Maybe they should say in the Garden of Eden, instead of being tempted by the apple, was that they were tempted by sex. It was about sex, is what it was about. So, we ended up having these beings that got banished from the Garden of Eden. So they were no longer androgynous, and they no longer had their eternal youth. And so this is where the separation occurs. So they were condemned to a fall from the higher dimensions to the third, and human evolution. So then we had, as in this documentary, it talks about the cataclysm that we've talked about. So this is the first time that I've heard about this goddess that is in the higher realms, in the North Pole realms of Agartha in Hyperborea. Her name is Siva, C-I-V-A, like Shiva, but not Shiva. Siva, C-I-V-A. Well, there was a dispute that happened in the celestial realms. And the reason why was because, like I said before, we had these 4 different archetypes after the human form got the ability to hold the frequency of these higher dimensional souls. Like when people say, oh, I had a walk-in, you didn't really have a walk-in. You were always there. It's just you couldn't take the full expression of your soul because your body wasn't ready for it yet. This is why this happens at 10, 25, 35. You take more and more and more of your full soul expression. So when you're little, that little body just can't take it all. And maybe that's why they put these kids in the program, because if they fracture it all out, they can try to hijack it. So this goddess Siva had a dispute with some of these others because evil spirits had settled in the heavenly cities. And so there was a devastating beam that was struck on the planet. And I think this is what I remember as the accident in the North Pole when everybody had to come out of there. I thought it was a meteor. But according to this documentary, it says that evil spirits had settled in the heavenly cities and destroyed it with a devastating beam. Our North Pole accident, it fell into Earth's atmosphere and fell into rubble all over Earth. And it looked like splinters of a meteorite had fallen. Now, I've talked about this map till I'm blue in the face, because this 82-degree longitude line goes all the way up to the North Pole. And it's showered all along here with fragments all the way to the South Pole, to Antarctica, from fragments of this time. And I think this is when we had a pole shift. I think this is what we had a pole shift. And I think that our pole is actually going to shift back. And this is how we reunify and phase shift back with our antiparticle Earth, right? This is bringing it all back. Okay. And, you know, a lot of sightings been kicking up too. Hey, Taki. So let me read the comments in here real quick. Let's check the chat. Okay. Cooking rice and beans. That's nice. That sounds good. Yeah, I love vegetarian. Okay, Stacy. All right. Archangel Michael is not good. Yeah, you know what? I think that Archangel Michael has a lot of his... Okay, so if you think of him as oversouls, right? If you think of them as oversouls, there's fractals of that soul that's just fractured out, right? Into eons of people. I mean, I don't even know at an archangel level how many different layers of that soul would be. So from that oversoul. So he could have just a lot of pieces of his oversoul that's fractaled down, that's stuck in polarity, because you have to remember, he's a protector of man. So he had to willingly step into this experiment to protect us. So, you know, and maybe this is why he takes the form that he does, his archetype, right? All right. Dr. Moreau's soul transfer trap seems highly plausible. Fibonacci looks like a seashell. It absolutely does. Okay. Hello. Yes. Predictive programming. Yes. Okay. So let's get back to the notes here. All right. So basically, the North Pole was destroyed and everybody had to come out of there. And so I had mentioned before that those meteors, there was some meteors that hit here from Mars, and Bill Clinton showed one on TV. He showed this meteor that they found in Antarctica, and they did testing and found that it was from Mars, and he wasn't supposed to tell that. So the question is that when we've had these other planets that have gotten destroyed, that have been destroyed over time, like they say it's Maldek, but I mean, do we even really know that's the name of that planet, Maldek? So if we had these pieces that this planet that exploded, and then these pieces created the rings that are in Saturn, right? This would have been the backward. You know, they would have had to have done this themselves, right? In order for us to have this experiment in this particular universe, they would have had to create the explosion to blow up Maldek to have the chain reaction that it could, because if nothing is unplanned and nothing is absolutely perfect, source is perfect in every single way. So it would have had to have been planned, right? So they would have had to have planned to blow up Maldek, and then it would have intentionally knocked Venus off its orbit, which would have almost hit Earth. But at the same time, they talk about how the moon was put into place as an installation, because the moon is the reflective surface of our reality, right? The sun is the creator. Everything came from the sun. So the sun is the birth parent of this whole universe. All the planets came from the sun, is what I'm reading here. So if everything came from the sun, and then that sun will eventually turn into a star, I just got a thumb from Theo on my watch, turn into a star, and then turn into a universe. So, you know, we all can become our own universes. All right. So we had demi-humans, kind of like demi-permanent hair color, right? who had paranormal abilities out the wazoo, right? Because they had cheat codes. They got cheat codes in their genetics. So, they were far advanced from just being ordinary mortals here on Earth. So, their chakras were vibrating higher because of their breeding, right? So the prophets, the high priests, and the magicians of all times have been souls and reincarnated souls of these fallen groups. And it was all planned. Jesus, the Jesus Christ consciousness archetype is reborn over and over and over and over and over and over again, and not just one person, but in many, 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 many people, because they're trying to bring an archetype into the field. You're pre-programmed with that archetype with your genetic imprint, guys. This is why you're born in this particular place. This is why that you followed a genetic profile through. Sometimes people have, unusual birth circumstances. Nothing is a mistake. It's because it's for this time right now. It's all planned. It was all planned. So the Atlanteans were using gates, and they had off-world travel. They had a harmonic grid built on Earth, and they understood that Earth is a biological living being, and the planet is a body, and its people are the cell extension of that body. The Earth was adored and cared for. Only one Earth. So, they knew this. There was only one Earth in common with all of them. There was no class distinction. They all lived in abundance, and everyone contributed to their communities with all of their own personal achievements. And so what ended up happening was you had Argarthians and Shambhalans that were two priest classes that were embodying duality in Atlantis. And this is how it all went south. So we got involved in all of this, and then they decided they were going to drop into the third dimensional space. And so this is when Atlantis went down. So Atlantis, it was an intentional loss to bring the cycle to the end, right? And all of the people are reincarnating that are born, that are carrying this Atlantean coding, we're working out karma from this timeline. We're closing the loop and we're going into the spiral. You're born around water. You're born around the Great Lakes. You're born around the coast of the United States, all the way down, Florida, Texas, all the way, water codes. This is why you're born by water codes, by big lakes. It's because you were born with these water codes for this timeline, right? So I started listening as, how you start watching something, you start reading something, you come across another person, then you start listening to lectures and listening to audiobooks. So I ran across this information by this man named George Van Tassel, and he wrote this book called The Council of Seven Lights. And so some of the interesting things that I took notes on his that I wanted to talk about is that he says that there are 12 densities in the system that we occupy. That each major, what did I say? Each major is divided into, I don't know what I wrote here, but he's saying, each major cycle. Okay, so he's basically confirming what we've been talking about with this cycle clock back here, right here, that each major cycle is divided into 12 minor cycles, just like 12 on the clock, right? We've already ascertained that. So this is confirmation that we're right. So each major cycle is divided into 12, and then there's 12 minor cycles. And then when a solar system moves out of one density into another, which we've been talking about phase shifting. I've been spending a lot of time in astral phase shifting people, teaching people how to phase shift and walk between dimensions and densities. So he's saying that when a solar system moves out of one density into another, which is phase shifting, where we're going to be reuniting with our antiparticle Earth, we're going to be coming back together, phase shifting back together, right? It's called a master cycle. So we are on a master cycle right now. So Our current solar system is between density 3 and density 4. Presently, Earth is not only in a master cycle, guys, right? Because we have the precession of the equinox and all that stuff, but we're also in a major and a minor cycle. So the poles will be rebalanced according to the Council of Seven Lights. The poles will be rebalanced, so we will no longer be like 28 degrees off. We'll be right back the way that we originally were. This is the original Earth template, guys. This is what I'm calling the original Earth directive, right? This is what we're here for. We're here for Mother Earth. So this is going to be presented with this great earthquake that they talk about in Revelations, guys. We have to hold the red thread, right? We just have to be like Noah, the archetype of Noah, and prepare our ark, guys. We prepare our ark. That's all. So reunification of Earth's particle and antiparticle self, phase shifting, and the last thing is that humanity has a choice this time. That's what I was told in Astral by the higher beings. They told me this time we have a choice. We have a choice. So I've started noticing that David Wilcock's lectures are starting to come back into, coming into the field. And I never really got to watch a lot of them because they were always, like paywalled on Gaia. So I've never really heard anything that he has to say. But, I guess that he thought he was reincarnated from the oversoul where Edgar Casey came from. He thought that he was Edgar Casey. So but a lot of the stuff that he talks about is just like what we've talked about on the channel. Matter of fact, he confirms everything. He talks about the bird being. I saw that bird being that one time, and I do what's called bilocating in my sleep. I'll take family members with me. I'll go to my childhood home. I'll be there with different family members. I don't know. I've seen dead family members have been coming to me since as long as I can remember. Everybody that dies in my family, or friends or coworkers, they always come to me after they die, and they give me little bits and pieces of information. And so, when I run across this stuff, and then I read stuff, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's just like what my brother was telling me about, because when my brother first crossed over, he came and told me like a million things. Oh my gosh. He was telling me so much stuff because, my brother, he didn't believe in shit when he was here. And he always thought I was a weirdo because, I was different. I seen things. I couldn't help it. And so they didn't really understand me. But after he died, he'd come back and he was like, oh my gosh, Stacy, you were right. He's like, there's no time concept. There's no time concept. You can go forwards and backwards in time, any which way you want to go. He's like, once you leave there, you can do whatever you want. I'm like, what? Yeah. So our solar system is now about to phase out of the third density into the fourth density. And then we will be on a 370-day-a-year calendar. So density is pressure established in changing frequencies of vibration. This is compression and expansion. This is like what we're doing right now, right? We want to go into a spiral because this is compression, right? We have to have compression to move the wheel, right? And so just like in the book, in the story in Genesis about Joseph, right? In the coat of many colors, the wolf archetype, Benjamin is the center of that wheel, and he stays behind with his father. Right? He stays with the father, which is 1 on the Fibonacci spiral, right? Benjamin stays behind because he's already embodying the wolf archetype, guys. He's already embodying it, his Christ consciousness. He's staying right there with the father. He doesn't have to go on the hero's journey like Joseph does, right? And Joseph's coat, that's mistranslation. Joseph is wearing the wedding garment. He was prematurely given his wedding garment. He hadn't earned it. He didn't embody the 13th archetype yet. He had to go on the hero's journey to embody the 13th archetype, which he recognized when he was reunited with his brother Benjamin, who never left home, who was never involved in the whole hiatus to get him kidnapped and sold into slavery, right? Which was 20 pieces of silver, 2 for the reflection, right, of self. Number 2 in the Fibonacci spiral is moon reflection, 2, 0. So once again, moving him along on the hero's journey. So we have him coming back and embodying the 13th archetype at the end. He sees his brother Benjamin, and his reaction to Benjamin is totally different than his other siblings. Even though he'd embodied the 13th archetype and all was forgiven, he recognized his self, his completed journey in his brother's archetype. And so that was the wolf archetype. So time is not measured in the absolute. So dimensions are measurements. Time can be phased in density and moved forward or backwards. And this is verified by my brother. He said you can go forward or backwards, that after you leave the system, time does not matter. Okay? But only through the 0 point and polarities can you do this. So all planets are evolving through grades, just like what we talked about. All these planets are on cycles, guys. When they get to the end of their cycle, like we're getting to the end of our cycle, if they get to the end of their cycle and they're not making the grade, they get kicked back. They come back to 3D, third density, right here. And you get to start over, right? But this school never ends, guys. This school never ends. Just like my one friend that I worked with at Public, she trained me. And her name was Mary, and she was born on Christmas Day. When she passed away, she came to me, and she was with this guy who never spoke, and I guess he was her guide or her oversoul. I'm not sure. He looked just like Paul Simon. She was in a uniform. She was carrying a clipboard, and she said to me, "I'm still on the job." And I'm like, really? That's wonderful. When I have friends and family that come to me, it's like I'm so excited to see them. I don't even ask them anything important. And then, when I wake up, I'm like kicking myself. I'm like, why didn't you ask like something transformational? Like instead of like, well, what have you been up to? Just like I'm talking to her like she's still, in third density and she's still at Publix and, we're seeing each other every day. But she's like, I'm still on the job, girl. I'm still on the job. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But she was in a uniform. So it just goes to show you that this is an ongoing process of our soul growing. And that when we graduate from the Earth system, we go to another system. And I believe that we go to Venus. I do. I think that we go to Venus. So all planets are evolving through grades. So he talks about being energetically influenced by planets, which blew me away because we've been talking about this Fibonacci spiral and how all these planetary influences actually fall on this unfurling of basically life. This is life, right? And these is basically looks like a model of archetypes. So this is just confirmation that this is true, that we are going through a hero's journey. And it's like the unfolding of a Fibonacci shell. But we always have influences that are numbers that are not on this spiral. So we have the influence of 4, which is structure, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 to 20, and then 22 to 33. Interesting, right? 22 to 33. Mason, anybody? Right. It's all fallen into place with this material right here. So all of them are forms of influence on us, just like our energetic body. We've got our Huva body, which you can't see back here, but we've got all of these axiatonal lines that run through our body, and these energetic lines are at 90-degree angles, and they create tension, just like our mother's loom, right? So these energetic lines that run through our body have tension on them because we're in a dualistic system. We have to have tension in every possible thing to be able to exist in this 3-dimensional space. To pixelate here, it has to be in a tension, right? We're not reunified with our antiparticle self. So right now we're kind of like in flux. So he's talking about how our body has these energy lines, and he describes them as line A and B, which run 90 degrees to each other, and G lines. And he's talking about G lines being a line of infinite light that separates your consciousness, and it separates you from others with a skin boundary. And so he's talking about them containing both positive and negative influence. So if you have what you think is a negative influence that's holding tension, it may not necessarily be a negative influence, right? Because if you're talking about the Fibonacci spiral, you've got the alchemy state of Mercury, and you also have the alchemy state of Venus, right? Venus is copper, Mercury is Mercury, right? So if you're thinking of if you're looking at the influences that are numbers that are not, that are steps that are not in this Fibonacci spiral, right? And we're talking about these other influences. Some of those other influences, they can't all be polarity, right? They're holding tension, but what if this part right here is in a phase, in a transition phase, where it needs balance, right? And so we would have to have dualistic, and we would have to also have alchemy that is involved in these numbers that are not on the Fibonacci spiral. So what is the conductors that are in these other forms of influence? We have to have both. We have to have negative and positive in the positive, and negative and positive in the negative, if that makes sense. So we receive influence from everything. We receive influence from all the planets that don't fall in the Fibonacci spiral. They create tension. They create tension in the archetype. This is what creates the excitement in the story. This is what moves the characters along in the hero's journey, right? It's like when you pull back the arrow, the bow is pulled back to create the tension, which ejects the arrow. So this is all basically what this is all about. It's form of function. It's function on the hero's journey, and then it's the tension that keeps the hero on the journey. Okay. All right. So an expanding universe must have something to expand from. So the sun is what all planets in its progressive state of becoming space. The sun is what evolves planets in its progressive state of becoming space. An expanding universe must have something to expand from. The sun is expanding by digestion of the matter it encounters in the lines of primary light energy. So the sun is always expanding, but it's only giving back a certain portion, a fraction of what it's absorbing. So planets turn into stars that break away and form new solar systems. So apparently the reason why atoms never run out of energy is because of the sun. The sun never runs out of energy. It's only discharging a fraction of what it's absorbing. So the underlying energy patterns that are driving our atoms and molecules in the universe is geometry, which, Taki, you and I just talked about this the other day when I don't know where I was, with these beings at this meeting. I don't know. They were showing me all these symbols, right? And a lot of these symbols looked like diamonds, like, triangle, like diamonds. And so, they were downloading them into my brain, right? And then they were talking about, this is the language right here. And then when you see these symbols that are hidden everywhere, it activates part of your brain, right? So yeah, this is what he said in this part. He says that underlying energy patterns that are driving our atoms and molecules in the universe is geometry. The geometry is the key, because this is how vibration becomes visible, right? So relative to Earth, is positive and negative lines of primary energy, and they're working in opposition all the time, right? So this is what our archetypes are. This is what the archetypes are that are coming into the field, the opposite archetypes, which is going to be the wolf and the serpent, guys. Vampires and werewolves, guys. Vampires and werewolves, just like Twilight, right? I always thought Jacob was hot. Are we Jacob fans here, guys? Take me in one of those campfires any day. I'll sit and hang out with the Native Americans all day long. All right, so relative to Earth is positive and negative lines of primary energy, and they're working in opposition, and this is creating tension in the loom. All right, so the negative lines cause the Earth to rotate, and the positive lines are always trying to stop the rotation. And then it dawned on me, okay, well, Venus spins the opposite way of us. And Mother Earth has told me about us. There's a really important relationship that we have with Venus, and it has something to do with twinning. But it might be just what this is talking about right here, that Venus is what is creating tension in the reality for us right now, right? Is Lucifer is supposed to be a symbol of Venus, right? And we got an inversion thing going on right now with Lucifer, but Lucifer is he's just the archetype that's being presented in the current timeline, but we're getting ready to change out of that timeline. So maybe this is why the Luciferians have hybridized themselves with the serpent groups. Think about it, because they want to be here for the long haul. Right? They're getting their archetypes set up. So, I mean, it's something to think about. So, we got this timeline archetypes that are going to be coming into the field. And I believe these are the exact same two archetypes that presented themselves in 1776, guys. Because, there's a lot of stuff that's in these letters in the Library of Congress. You can go and read them. And there was a lot of shit going on. The family that was in Continental Congress at the time, they were working around all of these, going finding loopholes. They all went to law school. They were trying to find loopholes to get all these people out of slavery, indentured servitude, and, have state rights and the people's rights. And so what the Randolph family was doing was they were sending all of this people that they had to own, because they were all locked up in all of these legal paperwork. Land deeds, property deeds, everything. They were part of the property. It was like impossible to let these people go. So what they started doing was they found a loophole. And what that was that they had all of their slaves professionally trained. And so they were able to learn a career. So they got out of slavery. So, they set them up in their wills to have property in Piqua, Ohio. And Piqua, Ohio is John Randolph of Roanoke. He bought like 300 acres up there, and he let all the slaves go. He set them up with money, a homestead, a town, and everything. And it was a huge fight after he died. But I think his death was prematurely brought on. You know what I mean? Because he was trying to fight the financial system. He was around 1860. And he wasn't going for the central banking idea. And it's amazing. He just dropped dead too, just like Peyton Randolph, because, Peyton Randolph was fighting the crown. And so this cousin, I call him a jealous cousin, Lord Dudley, he came over here because he was sent over here by James, by the royal family, sent him over here to get Peyton Randolph in order, because they weren't following the rules. They wanted, they didn't want to be involved with England. They wanted this country to be united and be free. And so they came over to get him in order. And so the first line of business that they did was they stopped letting them have their meetings at Continental Congress. And so being a true Randolph that he was definitely not going to take that. So they all just went and met down at the taverns and the pubs and had all their congressional meetings down there, and completely ignored what was, these orders that were being put into place to try to, get these people in line. They weren't going to get in line. And so they had to go. So they had to go. I mean, does anybody find it coincidental that Adams and Jefferson both died on July 4th, like hours apart? Does anybody find that? Does anybody find that just crazy that they both died on July 4th? They were murdered. They were murdered by the cabal. The whole Louisiana Purchase was to keep the cabal from acquiring Louisiana. And one of the reasons that John Randolph of Roanoke met his demise was because he was trying to hold these Georgia governors and a few other politicians in Georgia at the time. He was trying imprisoned for doing what they did. Land deal. It was called the Yazoo land deal, and it was illegal. And they sold a bunch of acreage of Georgia and all these area going west, and it was illegally done. It was illegally done. And he was fighting that. See, that they were trying to get their hands on the land even back then. And so this is why we had, I just got a thump from Theo too. I think that this is why we had this relationship between Thomas Jefferson and Lafayette. And he was a Frenchman. And, you know, there was a really big relationship between the United States and France at the time, Continental Congress. Well, they were in France all the time. And, you know, there's a lot of different things that do back up what I'm saying, is that they were trying to get around slavery, because there are quite a few trips that Jefferson took to France when Patsy and his daughters were old enough to take care of themselves. They were like adult at this point in time. He was going over to France, and he was still taking Sally as her maid, you know, as her keeper. It was just that he was taking her, right? And if she didn't want to come back, she wouldn't have had to, because slavery didn't exist in France. So they walked around as free people in France. If you were black and you went to France in 1700s, there was no such thing as slavery. So they went there and they trained as pastry chefs, and they trained in different types of things. So when they come back, they had a literally like a degree, like they could be a French chef. And so that's how they got free. So it was working around. It was using the 13th archetype to see, hey, this is how both sides of this is. This picture is playing out. I'm going to navigate the middle, right? It's being a wren. It's outsmarting. It's outsmarting and being clever and cunning. See, this is what we have to do. And we can do it. We can be, you know, we can use our wolf senses, right, to navigate through this time. So Earth's rotation is basically based on the differential of these two tensions together. Negative lines causing the Earth to rotate, and positive lines trying to stop it at the same time. So basically, it's like we're living in a big drive shaft. So, you know, it's important to, you know, it's key to balancing our energy. I'm quite sure, you know, if all of this is basically just a game of balance, obviously it's important for us to be balanced, right? So, and the last thing that I wrote is that this is how we get time. This is how we get time. So, anybody have anything they'd like to discuss? Any news? How is everyone doing? How's everybody been? So if we've got a timeline, if our timeline has been altered 7 to 2,000 years, that's pretty interesting, right? So all these buildings that we think, you know, that they've been telling us, you know, they're probably not as old as we think they are, but they are old, right? They're from another cycle. We know that we've been going through these cycles over and over again, cycling through these archetypes. And, you know, the Christ consciousness archetype never disappears, you know. So it's just, it stays in the background because it has to create tension for the field, right? Because every archetype has to have an opposing archetype to hold tension, right? So this last timeline, what were the archetypes? Lucifer and Ahriman, right? Satan, what they call Satan, and Lucifer, the excess and the total animalistic nature. So These were the two polarities that have been holding in this timeline for this last cycle. This new cycle, it's the cycle of the wolf and the serpent. And so the question is that are these Luciferian groups that have fallen and don't want to go back to source, is this the reason that they've hybridized themselves with the serpent race? What do you guys think? They want to be able to embody these archetypes. They want to be able to embody these physical forms, go through the recycling bin and come back. What do you guys think about this? Is anybody here in the chat? I see people in here, but nobody's talking. So that's really, all I've got to talk about, but I do want to share a couple more things. So if you guys are working on trying to have memory recall from your astral experiences, I want to say again, because we got quite a few new members on the channel, everybody needs to be liking and subscribing to the channel. This is a non-profit channel. This is non-monetized, guys. This is free information. We share the information willingly from heart space, right? We're not here trying to do that kind of stuff. So I recommend that everyone take silver, colloidal silver, every day. If you have health problems, check with your doctor first. This is what I take every day, and this helps with my astral recall tremendously. I mean, like every day. It takes a couple days when you first start taking it. This is monatomic gold. I don't know how this camera works. I ordered this off of Amazon. You only need to do one little dropper full at night. I do it at nighttime. It helps me astral travel and have recalling memories in the morning. And then the third thing is I take this atomic ormus. And this has a different blend of, it has a blend of vitamins in it, but they're liquid. And so, for me, they just kind of absorb better. I've had a ruptured bowel, and, I've had to have part of my stomach bypassed. I've had a lot of near-death experiences. So, my body doesn't absorb nutrients like it should, right? Because of everything that's happened to me, the surgeries I've had to have, the reconstructive stuff. So these work better for me, but the monatomic gold, I'm telling you what, chef's kiss for me. Chef's kiss for me. I highly recommend this. Of course, check with your doctor, and we'll say all the disclaimers on here because we don't want to get sued by somebody that, drinks a bunch of atomic ormus or whatever. But, always follow the instructions. It's on the bottle. I personally use this, and it's amazing for me. It's like I've been taking it for a couple of days, and then I'm already back remembering everywhere I'm going, messages that they're giving me, things that are being discussed on the astral realm of what's going on here. Everything that happens there ends up happening here. So, I know that in the past I've been building water filtration systems. So I know that in this future timelines that we're going into, we got a lot of water cleanup to do. Oh, and the other thing that I want to show you is these X39 patches. I started using these. They do help. They don't help 110%, if you're chronic pain sufferer, which, I am. I've had multiple back surgeries, so I'm full of metal. And so in the morning, I wake up having to catch my breath, because when I first sit up in the morning, I get this pain, and I've had it for 22 years. And I put one of these patches on there's two places that you put them. You can put them underneath your navel or between your shoulder blades. I put it below my navel. And the next day when I sat up in bed, it was the first time it totally freaked me out. It was the first time that I didn't wake up in the morning and just be like, that's how I wake up in the morning. It's just, it takes my breath. First time, I didn't even know. It totally freaked me out. I was so excited. I was just like jumping for joy. But, And then the next day you take them, you wear them for like 12 hours and you take them off. You put another one on 12 hours later. And then you take it off. I tried it between the shoulder blade. Next day I got up, had the pain in the pain, the breathtaking pain, the stab pain. It was back. So then the next day I put it back in the below the abdomen, and it does help with that. It does help with that, So, I'll take whatever kind of help I can get, right? If I can get rid of some pain so I can be more productive and get a little bit further along in my day, a little bit further along in pulling weeds, planting seeds, whatever I got to do, making soap, contributing, I'm for it. I'm for it. I don't want to take a bunch of medicines because it doesn't make me feel good. I don't want to be on pain medicine. I don't want to take that kind of stuff. It messes up your stomach. It messes up your memory. I want to be smart. I want to be clear-minded. I don't want to be intoxicated with pain medicine. And not to mention that it just messes up your whole system. Like it messes up your digestion. It makes you have like slow bowels and stuff like that. So, that's not conducive to vitality. So, place links in the chat for the videos. I will put them in the link in the description. I'll pin them after we end the video. Are you talking about for the 5.5 hour documentary? Yes, I will put them in. Yes, I will. So I'm going to wrap up this live video. Thanks everybody for coming in. Does anybody want to talk about anything before we log off here? I'll put the links in the description box for the documentary. I think that I already put them on the community, but if not, I'll still put them here so you guys can watch them. That one is almost 6 hours long, so it's like, but it is absolutely jam-packed with good stuff. Like you're just sitting there like slapping yourself in the face. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It feels good to finally, have somebody that validates your experiences. When you have experiences your whole life and then people start waking up and they're like sharing their experiences, and then you want to share your experiences with these people because you've had a lifetime of experiences just stuffed inside of you you've never been able to talk about. And then when you talk to people about it, they're like, what? They can't even relate to what you've been through, right? And then you just totally feel like an outcast. I've felt like this for so long. And so, I've always been a wolf. And this is my coding. And I've always been outside of the circle. So, it just goes to show you that, you can embody the wolf and take the hero's journey to do it. So there's no right way. We're operating both sides of the wheel in this wolf archetype, the inner and the outer, right? Some of us are born with the journey, and some of us are embodying the journey as we go along, right? So, we all have our archetype that's here for this timeline. And I truly believe that the wolf archetype is for right now, guys. And, there's a lot of people that are, waking up to the fact that this wolf archetype is in their bloodline. It's in the bloodline. And, people that are friends of the channel, they're being contacted by people that are seeing, werewolves in fourth dimensional space, or, they're having experiences like, all of us have had when we first encountered our wolf archetype in our blood, in our imprints in our blood. It's carrying in our blood memory. This is our animalistic form that we first started with. So, it's really nice to run across these books and these things like this that say, hey, yeah, this is how it really was, guys. This is how it really was. The first forms were animals, right? And these are the earthlings. And, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a form of function. It's an archetype. And I'm okay with being a wolf archetype because you know what? They're great animals. So, and they're wonderful mothers. So with that, guys, when the rest of the world comes and finds this video, we'll be here because we're in the past, present, and the future. all at the same time. Thanks, guys, for being here tonight. Love you all. Catch you on the next one, and I'll put the links in the comment section, guys, for those 2 videos. Good night.